Okay. So you're talking about incremental improvements happening, and do you see some kind of in your study, say for example, you talk about the 16th century, but the impact on how it hits the society takes several maybe a decade or a century, so to speak. So therefore,
Yeah.
have you kind of studied that and looked at an invention to really make a significant impact in the way it changes the society and culture? How long do you believe it takes? Because you tend to look at the end most of the times and get excited, but when you study history, you realize that it probably is almost maybe done about 100 years back. And is that some kind of a history or statistic that you kind of picked up?
Yeah, I don't think there's a general rule for particular inventions, right? It's not like it's always going to be 100 years or 120 years or 80 years, and that maybe changes over time. Certainly, there are changes in the speed of adoption of inventions, right? I mean, a lot of people will have seen curves for showing the number of people in the proportion of people in the United States, for example, who owned a television or refrigerator or car or iPhone, and it gets steeper and steeper and steeper the further you get into the 20th and then into the 21st century. So yeah, it's unclear with adoption. I suspect it was much slower. Things like the printing press do make a huge difference in terms of just speeding up adoption rates, because your ability to put out information for people to be able to figure out what's going on increases quite appreciably. So communications technology is a big part of that, and presumably will have changed that rate. But also, not all things need to be adopted by everyone, right? A lot of the inventions we're talking about are only done by a handful of manufacturers, a handful of artisans, and they're often covering the entire country pretty much, or entire cities. And there are, I think, some some impactful inventions, many of which will be almost unknown today, where just from the way that the economy is structured at the time, they have much larger and much more rapid impacts than others. So to give you an example, today, if you were to come up with an invention in Britain that improved agriculture by 100%, so a doubling in the efficiency of agriculture in Britain, agriculture only accounts for what, 1-2% of the British economy today. So even your doubling's not going to have a huge impact on most day-to-day people's lives in the country. If, however, you come up with 100% improvement in agriculture in 1600, when agriculture accounts for the majority of employment, the majority of people's expenditure in terms of family, household expenditure, about 80% of people's wages at least is going on food and drink, on output in general as well within the economy. It'll again be about 50-60% still. You're going to have a huge impact on basically everyone's lives, to the extent that even small changes in agriculture, the 1% and 0.5% and 0.2% improvement, many of which we probably don't know much about at all and really deserve quite a lot of study, are not going to. They're not going to seem as though it's not going to seem as though there's much going on, but actually you could have very dramatic, very quick changes happening as well. Right? You improve the efficiency of agriculture back then, and everyone's going to notice, even if they don't know what's responsible, they're going to see results, right? They're going to see more people. They're going to see better food. They're really going to notice, considering just how much more of their daily experience is just revolving around that one sector of the economy. The same with textiles, right? There's a reason everyone talks about cotton all the time when it comes to the Industrial Revolution. It's because textiles were a really, really big deal, right? Clothing yourself was much more expensive as a proportion of your income as it would be today. Clothing, textiles accounts for something like about 15% of the economy in Britain, in the 18th century.
Okay.
That's a big deal, right? Even in China today, where so many of the world's textiles are coming from, I don't think it's ever been more, well, around now it's not more than 7 or 8%, right? So even then it's double the size in terms of just internally what's going on. So yeah, those inventions have a much bigger impact, and it's no surprise that people notice at the time, and that's the reason those inventions are the famous ones. Whereas you can have just as much invention happening in, I don't know, I keep mentioning gardening because it's just a nice example of something where not that many people are doing gardening, right? But even though there's not that many people doing gardening, right, you can see very similar amounts of improvement taking place, but they're not having this much broader impact on everyone's lives.
Mm-hmm.